Welcome back to the Tommy Stone Show, everybody. I hope you're doing good. Today we have a very interesting episode, one that I haven't typically done. We're going to be talking about Jeffrey Epstein, and we're going to be going all in depth on Jeffrey Epstein and pretty much everything that I know and everything that has been updated in the last week, how I feel about it, how I think you should be feeling about it, and if you feel differently, always make sure to comment down below, because that boosts the algorithm if you disagree, and I always love responding to your guys' comments. But again, going over just pretty much the new facts, everything that's been going on. Jeffrey Epstein, as we all know, the man connected to presidents, prime ministers, billionaires, pretty much every single powerful person in the entire world has been exposed for knowing Jeffrey Epstein in some sort of way. He died in 2019 when every single camera in his jail malfunctioned. He was put in a single cell when he was on suicide watch, and that's literally against protocol. We had a Reddit post that was now confirmed. From this Reddit post, apparently a prison guard witnessed Jeffrey Epstein being escorted out of the jail. That is for a whole another video. But that prison guard was also confirmed to be a legit eyewitness, and that 4chan is not a Reddit post. That 4chan post that he made saying that Jeffrey Epstein could have possibly been wheeled out of the jail before his death, that could actually be true. And that was a real eyewitness account. So that, to me, is incredibly interesting, but I will digress on that. Right now, we have incredibly huge updates. The biggest update right now is that Bill Gates is going to be testifying after about over 1,000 emails. His name was mentioned over 1,000 times in the files. He had, without a doubt, hundreds of emails and exchanges with Epstein, going on his jet, meeting with him many times. And as we all know, the infamous Russian girl situation, where he might have got Melania a little bit sick. And then what's really interesting about that is that the same time that he ended up getting Melania with that STD and he was with those Russian girls, he actually created a campaign and a competition to create a condom that essentially feels like you're not wearing one. And he was going to pay the person who came in first place $1 million. I didn't look too much into the story, but literally at about, I think it was within like a 3 to 4 month period, like of when he got diagnosed and when he found out, when he was corresponding with Epstein telling him that's when he launched the competition. So I find that, first of all, gross, but incredibly crazy that Bill Gates is doing this. But on top of that, Trump's Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick is now also going to be testifying, and not the guard mentioned in the 4chan post, but another prison guard, the last prison guard to see Jeffrey Epstein alive, is also going to be testifying because for some reason they fell asleep, the cameras weren't working. Again, every single thing that you could imagine goes wrong with Epstein's guards and with Epstein's case and with him in that jail cell went wrong, as we know, because that's why we all know Jeffrey Epstein did not kill himself. Anybody who's telling you otherwise is probably just trying to joke with you. But this has been the biggest Epstein week in years. I mean, we haven't seen this many people get called and being subpoenaed and being questioned and being called to testify in Congress in a very long time. Again, we just had Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton. We got pretty much absolutely nothing out of that. They were just lying to the camera the entire time, saying they had no idea who he was. Melania's recently talked about Epstein, saying that apparently there was rumors going around that she met Trump through Epstein, and then she came on live and said, no, this is absolutely egregious. This is not true. I actually thought that was very interesting that was even addressed, because I'm pretty into most of the Epstein with the know-abouts, the talk, and I didn't see much about that. So I was very surprised that was even addressed. That was very off character and just didn't really make sense. It was also a very late timing thing. You would think that would have happened when the files were dropped closer to then, but again, it's been a few months since all the files have been fully dropped. So that was a very weird timing aspect of everything. But on top of this, again, the only reason that we know the Jeffrey Epstein story right now is because of the recent Epstein file release, but we still have a ton of answers or questions that do have no answers. And to me, the biggest one is, how did Jeffrey Epstein get his money? I feel like people are really kind of just dropping this aspect of this, and how the money always proves, and if you follow the money, that is where you will find out the real answers and the real truths. Again, as everybody's talking about, Jeffrey Epstein apparently was a member of intelligence. He was a member of Mossad, or possibly also working with the CIA. He could have been working with the British intelligence as well. We don't know, but for sure what we know is he was most likely a member of the Mossad, which is Israel's intelligence agency, and is also probably working with the CIA in some way. But the reason why I say the money is the most important aspect of this is because Epstein has never, not once, we don't have, I actually think we might have like one filing, but it was for like a different type of company, but for all of his hedge funds and all of his money management companies, Jeffrey Epstein, again, was supposedly this huge currency trader, this very smart, very ahead of the market currency trader. We don't have one 13F filing from Jeffrey Epstein or any of his LLCs ever on file, which means that none of his LLCs ever placed one trade, and if they did, it was never on paper. So we don't know where any of his money actually came from. Again, something that's super interesting about Epstein was that he worked for Bear Stearns during 2008 and was a part in essentially leading the team and one of their offshore, one of their essentially their fake companies, one of their shell companies. It was called Liquidity Holdings. Epstein was the president or director. He was like one of those big roles of essentially creating the loans that collapsed the economy in 2008. It was the CDOs. It was these collateralized debt obligations, and he was packing them in with the mortgage-backed securities. Epstein, again, got off scot-free for this. Again, he was essentially perpetrating fraud. He was creating fraudulent loans. And what's super interesting about this that nobody's talking about is that Bear Stearns was bailed out. Bear Stearns was completely bailed out in this entire incident when Lehman Brothers was not. So why, again, was Bear Stearns picked? Well, it begs the question, maybe Jeffrey Epstein, again, and his intelligence connection, maybe could have played a role in this, but this was very early on in his career. But it's very interesting if you look at it this way. Epstein was making a ton of money off selling these bogus loans, these bogus CDOs, while he was making a ton of money making this huge fake bubble, and then eventually the bubble burst, right? And Epstein should have lost all of his money. But in reality, the U.S. government came and then bailed out all of these banks and helped banks buy other banks. Again, as we know, Bear Stearns was then, I believe, bought by J.P. Morgan. I should be right. I will double check that just to make sure. But it was bought by J.P. Morgan. And on top of this, Bear Stearns, when this all happened, there was nobody was facing any sort of jail time. No executives went to jail for this. Again, in broader 2008 crisis, I believe only one banker went to jail. And that was a small time, like he was a community banker essentially for a Chinatown. It was called Abacus Bank. I had to write a paper on it, so that's how I know about it. But it was a very, very small bank, and only one banker went to jail. It was essentially a show trial, just to say, hey, look, here's the one banker that we're putting in jail for the crisis. And nobody actually went to jail who was responsible for the crisis in 2008. And that's because, again, money talks. That is this Epstein connection. The money consistently talks, and that is what history has proven to us. So going off of everything I just said, just to kind of boil it down, what we know is that Epstein was, in fact, a member of intelligence. There's about a 99% chance. We have this confirmed on multiple levels from also multiple former Israeli intelligence officers also confirming this, which to me is very interesting. But to me, the smoking gun of why he is who he is, why he is an intelligence asset, is because we don't know how he got his money. He got all of his money from this blackmail operation, again, blackmailing the most powerful people in the world. It's most evident with Prince Andrew. Again, when Prince Andrew most likely stopped paying into the blackmail, that's when all of a sudden the photos with him with these underage girls got released. That was years ago, and since then he's been essentially blackballed completely from the royal family. He's now, I believe he actually got arrested for it recently, which is incredibly interesting. Overseas, we are seeing a ton of legal questioning and tons of people not only resigning from positions, but actually facing legal trouble for the Epstein files overseas. But again, in America, you're only seeing people resigning from positions themselves voluntarily. You're not seeing any sort of real legal enforcement besides these testifyings to Congress and subpoenas. And the icing on top, without a doubt, is the 2008 sweetheart deal that Alex Acosta gave Jeffrey Epstein. As everybody knows, he was given an incredibly light sentence for a ton of counts and a ton of people coming forward saying that they had been abused by him. He received an incredibly light sentence that included a work release where he was able to freely go from the prison, go work where he wanted, and then come back to the prison. Again, just a completely nonsense deal. But going back to what's going on with the testimonies, we have a ton coming out, and I have a huge list for you. But again, the most important ones that you need to know about are Howard Lutnick and Bill Gates. Those are the two that you really need to focus on. We have a ton of smaller ones like Ted Watt or Ted Watt. I don't really know how to say his name. He was essentially a co-founder that has had relations with Epstein. Again, we're starting to see almost every single person who was mentioned multiple times come in now in front of Congress and be questioned. Again, we're also seeing a lot of people resigning, maybe not necessarily in America, but overseas. But in America, we're starting to see a few people resign. The cousin of Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, Thomas Pritzker, he has actually stepped down from his position in work because of his current relations with Epstein that were exposed in the files. So that's incredibly interesting. And we also had Bill and Hillary Clinton, as we all know. They testified for over 6 hours, but we got pretty much nothing about what was going on Epstein's plane, on his island. They were denying everything, which is just completely ridiculous. Les Wexner was also subpoenaed in about late February, but that was a pretty ridiculous showing. His lawyer looked like his handler, was literally grabbing him by the back of the neck, telling him not to say things and to shut up. So it was that, again, this entire Epstein situation, the more and more we've been diving into it, the more and more the files have been peeled into and dived into, and the more subpoenas we've been getting, it seems like the less answers we've been getting. So that is incredibly frustrating, but the most important, in my opinion, what I'm very excited to see is the prison guard who was the last person to see Epstein alive. What is she going to say in her subpoena and her testimony? What is going to happen? I wonder who is her lawyer going to be? Has somebody been paying for her lawyer? Is she paying for her lawyer herself? Because if she's paying for her lawyer herself, she might not have the best equipped lawyer, and she might be saying a little bit too much when she's on the stand, and things could get interesting then. But again, if she's protecting something and she has information to hide, then she is going to have been equipped with a very, very, very intelligent and powerful lawyer who's going to make sure she doesn't say anything that is going to get her in trouble, but especially other powerful people in our system in trouble. So I don't think that's going to happen. I really don't think anything's going to come out of these testimonies. That's what's really sad about everything. And that's what's something that people kind of have to understand about the Epstein files. The reason why they were released is because that was kind of a DOJ waving a white flag saying, hey, we're not necessarily saying that we're going to get any arrests out of these files and out of what happened, but we are going to give you everything that we had. And why that creates a huge issue and why that's them waving a white flag is because that creates a 5th and 6th Amendment violation for any single person who now takes the stand who is going to be prosecuted by the United States of America for these Epstein crimes. Because releasing the files to the public makes this a media trial. So first of all, it is almost impossible for a jury to be unbiased coming into this case. So that's one part of it. But the second part of it is that we have legal precedent that we've turned over far smaller cases for smaller amounts of media coming into a courtroom and essentially taking it over, making evidence inadmissible, and also skewing public opinion to make prosecutors, to make judges, to make members of the jury lean one way and to vote one way. It essentially makes a trial impossible when you have so much media attention on one case where people are literally impacting the outcome of the case. Because if they vote one way, again, like think about it in the aspect of if they vote to say Epstein, or the people who are getting prosecuted for Epstein, if they are innocent, they get voted for innocent, they could be threatened themselves. The jury could lose their lives from the public. People would be incredibly angry if they let these people out. So they might just vote guilty for the sole fact that they don't want to be looked at by the public as enemies of the public and somebody who let these people off the hook. So again, this trial is we're never going to really see any sort of person come to trial just because of the way our Constitution is written, where you cannot simply create a media frenzy and then get somebody arrested. That is just a sad truth, because if you look at it another way, if you create a media frenzy for the wrong person to be arrested, then it's just not really working. That's not a working system. So I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but there will never be any sort of actual prosecution coming out of these Epstein files, in my opinion. I don't think we'll actually see anybody in America be arrested. Again, we will see people be testified and subpoena, but again, these are some of the most powerful people in the world with the best lawyers in the world. You think they're going to really give up any incriminating evidence? I mean, really? We saw Bill and Hillary literally get grilled for 6 hours and they gave us nothing. In fact, Hillary was just getting mad. All she was doing was screaming at Congress the whole time, making it a clown show. We are not going to get anything. It is just really, really sad. But again, Bill Gates, I think that is going to be a very interesting testimony. Again, he's going to have a very good lawyer, so who knows what he's really going to say. But if he does end up talking about stuff, because he has been pretty open about the Russian girls incident, he has talked about it, he addressed it with some of his workers at a charity. He essentially gave a speech about it, trying to be like, hey, like, I know you guys have heard about this, but whatever, like, I know it happened, but let's be adults about it. It's pretty much what he said. So that's very interesting to me. He's kind of being more on the openly and admitting side to some aspects of this case. Again, he's not admitting to any wrongdoings, anything with underage people. He's saying that he never participated in any illegal acts, that it was just with, again, consenting adults. So again, Bill Gates is kind of a shaky subject because he has definitely done some incredibly illegal things, but will it be exposed? I strongly doubt it. He's probably only going to give us a few little pieces of the story. Again, the legal things that his lawyers are letting him see. And that's kind of where we stand. What do you think about this whole investigation? I hope the investigation continues to ramp up like it has been ramping up, and that it is not going to slow down. And the question is hanging for over 7 years. Who was Epstein? Who is he connected to? And who was funding his lifestyle? How did he get this money? We do not know the answers yet. I hope in the future from these subpoenas we'll get something. Again, Bill Gates is going to be a very interesting one. Howard Lutnick is going to be a very interesting one. But besides that, again, the security guard who witnessed Jeffrey Epstein's last moments, the last person to see him alive, that is going to be a bombshell. I can't imagine what the questions are going to be. And I'm praying that her lawyer lets her speak. Everybody pray that his as her lawyer lets her speak, because that will be a bombshell testimonial trial and a bombshell moment for the Epstein files. So I'm very excited for that. But again, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you subscribe to see how this story unfolds. I'm going to be covering a lot more closely in the future. But again, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.